Working across cultures. 3. Managing international teams. Track 7.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Business Time with me, Steve Langley. On tonight's programme, we'll be talking about managing and working in international teams from a cultural perspective. I'm joined by tonight's guests Julie D'Angelo, business psychologist and author of the best-selling book Business in Mind, and an old friend of the programme and cultural expert, Dale Hawkins. Hello, Julie, and welcome back, Dale.
Hello, Steve, and thank you for having me.
Hello again, Steve.
Well, I guess we should start by saying that international team working is becoming increasingly common, not only with teams of mixed nationalities in the same location, but also in virtual teams. This could involve a group of individuals based all over the world who rarely communicate face-to-face. Businesses really need to think about the potential problems as well as benefits attached to this way of working. Could I ask you both, what are the important points to consider when putting together or working with international teams? Julie.
Well, Steve, one thing to bear in mind right at the start is actually the way a team is seen in different cultures. In some parts of the world, a team is composed of so-called specialists, each with clearly defined roles and responsibilities. Whereas in other cultures, individual roles are much less clearly defined and responsibility is shared.
Interesting.
Yes, that's right. And of course, whether team members expect tasks to be very clearly set out by the manager or team leader, or if team members are expected to use their own initiative. This means there may be very different ideas about roles and attitudes to things like empowerment.
I see. But how could this cause problems?
Well, for example, the competitive nature of some teams may mean giving individuals praise for particular things they've done. This is a recognised way of motivating people. However, in a more collective culture, praising an individual may be less acceptable, as it's felt that the whole team takes either the praise or the blame for things. There may also be another difference, as some cultures tend to give financial rewards for achievement, whereas others value loyalty more highly.
Yes, Del, in more collective cultures, asking for assistance or seeking advice from another team member, whether you truly need it or not, is a way to build team spirit, solidarity and unity. Also, from a psychological point of view, this idea of group responsibility is important. In some cultures, a team member with a problem will consult another colleague for advice or assistance, whereas in other cultures, they will go straight to their boss.
Working across cultures. 3. Managing international teams. Track 8.
Yes, and while we're on the subject of so-called individual and collective cultures, what I think is really interesting is the way individuals relate to each other as far as knowledge is concerned. For some cultures, knowledge is power, so knowledge is only shared on a need-to-know basis. This sort of culture, again, favours the idea of the individual expert. Other cultures are more collective in spirit and will work and share knowledge for the common good. Knowledge is built up through group discussion and trust, and it's not felt to be the property of an individual. For these cultures, knowledge cannot be stolen as it's owned by everyone. A good example of this is that there is no real concept of copyright in the sense that it belongs to an individual or a specific company.
Yes, I think you're right. This is a really important consideration for international teams, and for me, the most interesting area. There's also a group of cultures which operate at the level of mutual debt, which is the idea of an exchange. What this means is one person will give information if someone does something for them in return. You know, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. Knowledge here confirms someone's status and is not readily shared. It's elitist in the sense that to benefit from knowledge, people will need to be part of the same network.
Working across cultures. 3. Managing international teams. Track 9.
Right. And what are some of the practical considerations involved?
Well, management of international teams leads to particular problems. Team members will have expectations about something simple like the number and purpose of meetings. In some cultures, team meetings are simply for planning. People then expect to be allowed to get on with the work. For others, meetings are more about keeping track of what's going on, to share ideas about progress, to talk about problems and mistakes and how to rectify them. Obviously, with virtual teams, another factor is the difference in time zones, which can make the scheduling of meetings problematic.
Yes, and don't forget, if teams do meet face-to-face, there are other considerations like body language, dress and manners. A good example is the simple handshake. This can be very different from culture to culture, with different connotations and meanings. Should you look the person in the eye? How firm should the handshake be? In some cultures, a firm handshake while maintaining eye contact is seen as a sign of trustworthiness and sincerity, whereas in other cultures it can be seen as challenging and over-assertive.
Thanks very much, Dale. You've really given us something to think about. So, Julie, moving on. Can I ask you about the sort of training which would help to implement...